One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. Chris, you've been an enterprise reporter covering Syracuse athletics now for Syracuse.com for the last 3 years, and it's been a pretty eventful 3 years. And now, of course, we have another athletic director search occurring. And I want to ask you to start what you feel like the vibe of the fan base is for, Mark Coyle's 10-month tenure and now going through the process again, but also how you believe the sentiment currently sits for the power players behind the scenes, whether those are donors, administrators, etc.
Sure. As far as Syracuse fans, I think their feelings, as they often are, can be summarized by Jim Boeheim, who essentially said Mark Coyle wasn't around here long enough to do anything of great impact or of great import. I think that's certainly giving Mark the short end of the stick. He made what I think is a good decision on the football coach, getting rid of Scott Schaefer. He made what was universally hailed as a good hire, bringing in Dino Babers. And he kind of, he shifted some administrative people around, brought in a more experienced compliance person. But if an athletic department is an ocean liner, there's only so much of a course change that he accomplished in 11 months. And I think that's probably the feeling of the fan base. I think it's just kind of a, thanks, see you later, nice knowing you.
And how about some of the key donors and decision makers behind the scenes? Do you have a sense on how they view this change?
Yeah. They were clearly disappointed. Mark was, again, universally hailed as what seemed like a really good hire. Everybody was talking about fit, when he replaced Daryl Gross. Daryl was kind of known as a forward thinker, a West Coast guy. We're a very conservative type of town that doesn't adjust to change very well, to be completely honest with you. So it was a challenge for Daryl, and Mark kind of resonated a little bit more traditional Midwestern values, and everybody was really excited. And then, obviously, like we talked about, his move of Scott Schaefer was pretty much thought of as smart. Bringing in Dino, was universally hailed as a smart thing. So people were excited about the way it was going, and then very, very disappointed that he'd leave after 11 years, especially for a job that, prestige-wise, finance-wise, it makes sense. But, as far as winning games, the Syracuse Athletic Department is in a much better position than Minnesota is. So there are a lot of people that don't get it, that think Syracuse is in better shape than Minnesota. Why would Mark Coyle leave us?
Last week, we learned about the search committee who will help move this process along and ultimately hire a new athletic director. And if memory serves me correct, maybe there was only one holdover from last year's cohort who went through the process. Chancellor Severud is in this group this time around. What does the makeup of the search committee tell you about where the search may go?
Yeah, I think the couple really interesting parts of it were last time there wasn't a coach that was directly involved. There was a strength and conditioning coach involved. There was a football player involved. But this time you put Dino Babers directly into the mix. So he's the football coach that Mark just hired. And I think that pretty obviously indicates that keeping Dino is a priority. We believe in this guy and we want to keep him around. And he's going to have to work very closely with the athletic director to figure out what can be done to kind of jumpstart this football program that's kind of had a decade of mediocrity at this point. That's pretty interesting to some degree. You've got a football coach who's going to be hiring his boss or playing a role in hiring his boss. And then again, the chancellor being directly involved in this one is interesting. Last time he just relied on the search committee to give him 2 finalists, and then he picked from the 2 finalists. This time it's a much smaller committee, and he's participating in it. He is not a big athletics guy. He has a law background. He was the former dean of Washington University in St. Louis. So he's not a guy who has a ton of athletic experience and really understands that world. So, I don't know. I'm not in that room. I don't know what he's thinking, but his involvement in that is going to be pretty interesting because he's not, he's kind of operating in a world that he's not particularly familiar with.
What's your expectation, Chris, on when we will know about a search firm partner, if there will be a search firm partner, and does the possibility exist that because Mark left within a year's time, DHR may have to do kind of another one for free for Syracuse on this front?
So in Syracuse's press release, they said that the search committee will be, determining whether to use a search firm or not. And my best understanding, and this could certainly change, is that they do not plan on using a search firm in the traditional sense. They kind of felt that there were too many egos, too many cooks in the kitchen the last time. Part of that comes with Board of Trustees members. Part of that comes with search firms, a new chancellor. They felt like there were just too many people involved in the last search, and it took forever, and it just became unwieldy. They haven't said that they're not going to use one at all, but I don't think they're going to use one in the traditional sense. Whether that means they'll use a search firm to do a background check or vet candidates that they like, or maybe it means that they already know kind of who their candidates are and they don't need the search firm to tell them to identify good candidates. They did it 11 months ago. The good candidates are still the same and we don't need them. I'm not sure why, but that's my understanding of what they're going to do with the search firm right now. So I suspect that they're not entitled, or they're not going to at least use, a free search from DHR.
You mentioned the possibility that a number of finalists from last year, to a degree, could have already been vetted. Granted, it was 12 plus months ago, but what's the likelihood in your mind that some of the folks who were involved last year could be heavily influencing the process or heavily involved in the process again this time around?
I mean, there's certainly, there's certainly a lot of reasons to assume that would be the case. A good candidate 11 months ago is probably a pretty good candidate right now. You had the assistant athletic director at Ohio State involved in the search. He was reported as the other finalist. You had the Bucknell athletic director, who was at least inquired about from Syracuse's end, John Hart, and some other names that Syracuse probably at least has some basic familiarity with. So it's certainly a good starting point. You've got some candidates that you already looked at and thought were quality people. That said, I've talked to some industry experts who think that this is just a much different job than it was even 11 months ago. You're not necessarily coming in to pick a football coach or to run a football coach search, which is kind of what Mark Coyle was brought in to do. You're more of a fundraiser now, and that becomes especially challenging when you've had so much turnover in the athletic director position, and at a school like Syracuse, where it's a unique environment. We don't have a thriving business community that you can just develop a good relationship with and open the doors and the money comes pouring in. There are a lot of alumni. There are a lot of successful alumni, but they generally gravitate to cities in this country elsewhere. They go to New York City or Boston, Washington, D.C. There's a big contingent of Syracuse alumni. So it's a lot more like relationship fundraising, one-to-one communication, and that's the type of stuff that generally builds over time. That's where I think that all the experts that I've talked to kind of think Syracuse's needs are, as opposed to just a guy who knows a good football coach and can bring him in.
And that's today's One Question, brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. One Question is designed to give D1 Ticker subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences. One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996.